Kidnapped for 3 days. My husband called it a setup, and my sister hired the kidnapper to torture me. I miscarried, hemorrhaged, and died at his doorstep, and he knelt before my ashes, crying until he vomited blood. In an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. Garbage was piled everywhere, the stench unbearable. Sarah had been held captive here for 3 days. A dull ache in her lower abdomen tightened her nerves, and she couldn't stop looking towards the door. Damn it, you bitch! What are you looking at? Sarah hadn't expected the kidnapper to be so alert. She licked her chapped lips and spoke weakly, "When can I leave?" In the dim light, the kidnapper sneered. His phone suddenly rang. The kidnapper looked at the caller ID and answered. So Mr. Peterson finally noticed his wife is missing? Sarah's pale face snapped up at his words. The call was on speakerphone. The kidnapper sat down casually, sprawled out, and lit a cigarette. Where is she? The man's voice was devoid of emotion, as cold as always. Hearing that familiar voice, Sarah held her breath. Do you have what I want? Is Mr. Peterson ready? The kidnapper didn't answer his question, just countered impatiently. Sarah didn't know what conditions the kidnapper had demanded, and she was so nervous that cold sweat beaded on her temples. The kidnapper ignored her for the moment. Sarah clenched her teeth, trying hard to listen to their conversation, her eyes filled with desperate hope. Let her talk. The kidnapper clicked his tongue in frustration, kicked away the trash at his feet, and held the phone towards Sarah. Sarah stumbled towards him, her face a mess, staring intensely at the phone screen and shouting into it, "David Peterson, save me." But before she could finish, she heard his voice, utterly devoid of warmth, say, "So she's still alive." The man's voice was shockingly clear in the small warehouse, hitting her like a physical blow. Sarah stood frozen, unable to believe that the words she had just heard had come from David Peterson. David Peterson, you. Playing pretend? Having fun? I didn't. Sarah realized what he meant. Even though he couldn't see her, she instinctively shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face like a broken dam. Emily hasn't even left the hospital room yet. You just can't stand to see her doing well, can you? Are you trying to use these despicable tactics to make me leave the hospital? No. I didn't lie to you. Beyond denial, Sarah couldn't say anything else at that moment. Her heart felt like it had been torn to shreds and then repeatedly trampled upon. If you enjoy this game so much, then keep playing for a few more days. Sarah froze in place, her heart a wasteland. Seeing that the conversation wasn't going as he'd expected, the kidnapper snatched the phone back. Just as he was about to speak, the person on the other end hung up without mercy. God damn it! The kidnapper was furious. He redialed, but the phone was off. Unexpectedly thwarted, he turned back angrily and slapped Sarah. Sarah felt utterly hopeless, still reeling from the shock of the conversation. Unprepared for the blow, she was knocked face first onto the ground. The acrid smell filled her nostrils. She found it incredibly difficult to breathe, and a burning sensation in her throat made her cough, the coughing growing worse and worse. Sarah weakly closed her eyes, letting tears fall. Her consciousness blurred, and for a moment, she couldn't tell if this was a dream or reality. Only now did she realize how utterly her life had failed. Chapter 2, I'm Pregnant. Emily's face was pale on the hospital bed. Listening to David Peterson hang up the phone, a flicker of darkness crossed her eyes. She then looked up at him. David, I'm okay. Where's Sarah? I thought I heard. Don't worry about her. David Peterson walked to the bedside and held Emily's hand, a hint of revulsion still lingering in his expression. Emily coughed softly twice. I know Sarah has always disliked me, but I really didn't want to be Mrs. Peterson. This time was just an accident, it's not Sarah's fault. Don't speak for her. This isn't the first time she's pulled a stunt like this. 2 years ago, Sarah had also disappeared suddenly for 2 days. He had dropped everything for a suddenly ill Emily, frantically searching the city for any trace of Sarah, not sleeping for 2 days and nights. But in the end, he discovered it was just a performance she had orchestrated to test his feelings for her. He was angry, but he still patiently brought her home. Yet, she had just laughed and said she had only gone to Japan with Michael for 2 days. She knew that place was Emily's nightmare, but she had still mercilessly twisted the knife in Emily's heart. David Peterson bent down, gently tucking the blankets around Emily, and sat down beside her. If she hadn't been so willful, how could you have had an attack and ended up in the hospital? Thinking back to how Sarah had once again psychotically threatened Emily, causing Emily to become emotionally agitated and trigger her heart condition again, David Peterson's tone was filled with coldness. Emily started to speak again, but her phone under the pillow suddenly vibrated. Emily subtly reached out and dismissed the call, then said plaintively, "I'm okay, David. Please don't be angry. I'm a little hungry." David Peterson nodded. "Okay, I'll have my assistant bring something." But Emily pouted playfully. "But I want the burgers from that place you used to buy for us, the one we loved so much." David Peterson looked at Emily, who had just come out of the emergency room not long ago. Her face was pale, and she looked at him with such anxious care. It inexplicably reminded him of Sarah in the past, and he suddenly felt a wave of annoyance. Shaking off these unwanted thoughts, David Peterson nodded, gave a couple more instructions, and then left. After he was gone, Emily slowly pulled out her phone from under the pillow. As David Peterson reached the hospital entrance, a text message notification suddenly popped up. He opened his phone and looked at the photo on the screen, his face instantly darkening with gloom. In the picture, Sarah was dirty and disheveled, her clothes torn, her body covered in bruises and injuries, her expression numb and lifeless. David Peterson scrolled through the messages, then replied expressionlessly, "Having fun with Photoshop?" After replying, he shut off his phone. He didn't believe that cunning, manipulative woman, Sarah, would actually allow herself to fall into such a predicament. David Peterson got into his black Cadillac SUV, which started abruptly and quickly merged into traffic. But after only a few minutes, the man couldn't suppress the rising fury within him. He slammed on the brakes, ignoring the driver honking behind him. He checked his phone, saw there was no reply, and immediately called his assistant. "Go find Sarah." The assistant listened to his boss's instructions, completely bewildered. Before he could say anything, the line went dead. In the abandoned warehouse, the kidnapper looked at the new message on his phone and the money on the card, which was only half of what he expected. He swore under his breath, then turned his attention to the woman lying silently in the pile of trash. The kidnapper kicked away a stool at his feet and strode over to Sarah. He grabbed her by one arm and pulled her up, sneering, "I gave you a chance, but your man doesn't want you. Since he won't answer my calls, don't blame me for not being nice anymore." With that, the man roughly shoved her back to the ground. Semi-conscious, Sarah struggled to open her swollen, red eyes. She saw the kidnapper taking off his belt. Sarah suddenly became fully alert. Realizing his intention, she struggled to crawl away. "No, don't. I've wasted so many days here, and I didn't even get much money. You think I'm not gonna have some fun now?" The kidnapper took off his belt and tied Sarah's hands together again. Sarah fought desperately, but the difference in their strength was too great. What's more, she hadn't been treated like a human being for days and had no strength left. "Please, let me go. I'll give you money, okay? I have money, let me go." Sarah cried out, her voice hoarse, struggling with her last bit of strength. But the next second, the sound of ripping fabric made her whole body stiffen, and she couldn't stop trembling. The kidnapper covered her mouth with one hand and his body covered hers. "No, I'm pregnant." Chapter 3, The Act is Over? It was the middle of the night in Harmony Creek in October, carrying a bone-chilling cold. Sarah clutched the torn clothes around her, staggering towards the Peterson villa. David Peterson lay in the soft bed, his mind a chaotic mess. He remembered the location his assistant had sent him yesterday, showing Sarah was in a seaside villa in Harmony Creek. He had almost thrown his phone. He had been tricked again by that woman with the same old trick. David Peterson couldn't stop frowning. He got up and poured a glass of water, trying to ease the turmoil in his heart. He thought he heard some unusual noise downstairs and was suddenly startled. David Peterson walked to the window with his glass and saw Sarah on the steps outside the gate, a complete wreck, struggling to knock on the door. What act was she putting on now? David Peterson frowned, went downstairs, and slowly walked to the door, opening it. The act's over, so you finally decided to come back? Hearing the man's voice, Sarah slowly raised her head. Seeing her appearance, David Peterson's heart skipped a beat. Sarah's eyes were bloodshot, her face pale but with an unnatural flush, and her mouth was bruised and purple. David Peterson suppressed the turmoil in his heart and stared directly at her. Sarah held onto the door frame, struggling to stand up. She slowly opened her mouth and asked with difficulty, "Why? Why did you do this to me?" She had walked back step by step precisely to ask the man in front of her, to ask him how he could be so heartless. Did he hate her so much that he wished she were dead? Hearing her voice, usually clear and pleasant, now rough and grating like it had been scraped by a knife, David Peterson instinctively took a step back, a flicker of disgust in his eyes. Seeing his unconcealed reaction, Sarah grabbed his arm like a madwoman and shouted, "David Peterson, why are you doing this? Do you even have a heart?" As she moved, her already torn clothes shifted, exposing her bruised and purple arm and the other unspeakable marks on her body. David Peterson yanked his arm away, and she collapsed to the ground, unable to bear the weight. The gravel on the ground cut into her skin, blood blooming like scattered crimson petals. But she seemed not to feel the pain, only staring in despair at the man she had loved for nearly 10 years. Seeing the marks on her body, David Peterson suddenly knelt down, his hands urgently tearing open Sarah's collar. When he saw the numerous marks on her, he froze. Sarah grinned at David Peterson, laughing. "Are you satisfied, David Peterson?" Saying this, she pointed to her lower abdomen, crying and laughing. "Did you see? Did you see my baby? The baby's gone too. Are you satisfied?" David Peterson instinctively looked where she was pointing and saw blood soaking her skirt, pulling into a dark patch. The silence at the villa entrance was broken only by Sarah's deranged voice. David Peterson snapped back to reality, pushed Sarah away, and scrambled to his feet. Chapter 4. He didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. This must be her play for sympathy, another one of her acts. Satisfied now? Are you finally satisfied? Sarah burst into laughter, a laugh that pierced deep into the heart, bitter to the bone, stabbing at the core. David Peterson, I regret it. David Peterson didn't know what she regretted. Looking at the stark crimson on the ground, the cold dread that permeated his heart made him unable to stay there for another minute. He turned around impatiently, harsh words spilling out. "Shameless! You'd do anything like this just to avoid a divorce. Fine, stay here. Come in when you've thought things through." With that, he turned and walked away. The butler, who had been standing far away, hurried after him, speaking anxiously behind David Peterson. "Mr. Peterson. Shut up. No one is to help her. Let her keep acting." David Peterson strode up the stairs. The butler knew he couldn't stop him and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He looked back at Sarah outside the door, who seemed almost deranged, and couldn't bear to look away. This was a child he had watched grow up too. How good this couple used to be. How could things have become like this now? Sarah felt her body growing colder and colder. The air was so silent she couldn't hear anything. She looked at the sky and slowly closed her eyes. When Michael arrived after hearing the news, this was the scene he found. The woman who had always been dazzling and brilliant was lying sprawled at the villa entrance as if abandoned, her clothes a mess, looking lifeless. The villa gate was shut tight, no one inside caring if she lived or died. Michael's eyes turned bloodshot in that instant. He gently picked Sarah up, carefully placed her flat in the back seat of his car, and sped off. Finally, half an hour later, he brought the blood-soaked Sarah to the hospital. "Doctor, doctor, hurry and save he. Quickly!" A series of rapid footsteps echoed down the hallway. Sarah was completely unconscious, only hearing Michael's voice in a daze. She struggled to open her eyes. Michael was already staring intently at her. Seeing her eyelashes tremble slightly, his heart stirred. Filled with love, he stroked Sarah's face and brows again and again, telling her to hold on, that she absolutely had to hold on. A warm tear fell on Sarah's bloodless cheek. Sarah seemed to sense the sorrow of the person beside her. Her lips parted slightly, but she couldn't make a sound. She wanted to tell Michael that she regretted it, that she regretted loving David Peterson. But she was so tired now. She felt like she couldn't hold on. Michael leaned closer, trying to hear what she was saying, but he couldn't make out a single word. Just then, the nurse and doctor arrived, pushing a bed that appeared quickly. Michael gently placed Sarah onto the bed, his gaze inadvertently sweeping over her lower abdomen. It was then that he noticed the unusually large patch of blood there. Michael suddenly froze, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He gently lifted Sarah's hand, which had been covering her abdomen, and lifted her torn skirt. The stab wounds clearly visible made him stumble backward. Chapter 5. He was tricked again. When Sarah was taken away by Michael, David Peterson stood silently watching from behind the window. Seeing Michael holding Sarah in his arms with such a worried expression, David Peterson's face was so dark it looked like it could drip water. Michael's carefulness with Sarah didn't look like they were just ordinary friends. He had just gone upstairs, and right after, Michael arrived. Wasn't this something they had planned beforehand? An act, another act. David Peterson clenched his fists, his anger intensifying. He didn't know how long passed. The night gradually faded, and the world outside was a vast expanse of gray. David Peterson was still standing by the window, unmoving. The agitation in his heart became more and more unbearable, but David Peterson couldn't tell whether this growing restlessness was due to Sarah's wretched appearance or because she had teamed up with Michael to trick him again. David Peterson abruptly pulled the curtains shut and dialed a number in frustration. Meeting in 20 minutes. He needed something to do so he wouldn't think. His assistant received the message and immediately notified all department heads. Because of this single sentence, everyone got out of bed at 5 in the morning, standing by ready. I'm sorry, we did our best. A few hours later, the doctor, looking exhausted, took off his mask and said regretfully to Michael, the patient suffered violent injuries before death and had 2 stab wounds, which caused a miscarriage. Coupled with excessive blood loss and delayed rescue, she passed away at 9:37. Please accept our condolences. A loud crashing sound echoed. Michael felt as if all the blood in his body had frozen. His gaze was vacant, everything was black. After a while, he finally reacted, rushing into the emergency room. He stumbled to Sarah's side, looking at her covered by a white sheet, his hands trembling, unable to touch her. The doctor said to Michael with sympathy, the family should make arrangements for the funeral. Chapter 6. Where is she now? Peterson Group. Mr. Peterson sat at the head of the table, meticulously flipping through the proposal in his hands. The further he read, the tighter his brows furrowed. Before he even reached the end, he slammed the document onto the desk, his piercing gaze sweeping across the room. The office was silent. Everyone lowered their heads, not daring to meet the big boss's eyes. His assistant stood behind him, looking at the back of his dark head, silently trying to be invisible. Mr. Peterson's face was tense and cold. He opened his thin lips. Is this the plan you've been working on for 3 weeks? His cold voice was not loud, but the words made everyone shudder. The office was silent for a moment. 2 seconds later, the head of the planning department, without even wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, picked up the document from the table and stood up, explaining nervously, Mr. Peterson, our initial plan was for the Southside Seaside Villa District area, but police officers went there this morning, we heard there was a death, so we had to reconsider. Hearing about the Seaside Villa and a death, Mr. Peterson was slightly distracted, then sneered, forcibly pulling his attention back. The planning department head hadn't finished speaking when he saw the big boss's brows suddenly furrow tightly. He instinctively fell silent, trembling, unsure whether to continue. Just then, with a crash, the door to the CEO's office was suddenly pushed open from the outside. He's so busy he doesn't even see his own mom? A voice from outside the door came through. Mr. Peterson looked up. Mrs. Peterson angrily pushed past the blocking her and walked straight in. Mr. Peterson instinctively frowned and waved his hand, signaling the meeting was over. The executives respectfully greeted Mrs. Peterson and left. His assistant, sensing the mood, wanted to leave but heard Mrs. Peterson say, "You stay." The assistant was surprised. He quickly reviewed everything he had done in the past year. Mr. Peterson was also confused. He frowned and said, "Mom, why are you here?" Mrs. Peterson pointed an angry index finger at Mr. Peterson's chest, her well-maintained face full of rage. "Do you even see me as your mom anymore? Mr. Peterson, Sarah was kidnapped. Why didn't you tell me? What on earth did she do to you? Are you bewitched by that vixen, leaving your perfectly good wife to stay by that seductive woman's side at the hospital?" Mr. Peterson's temples throbbed. He started to speak, but Mrs. Peterson didn't give him a chance. "Sarah won't even answer my calls now. Where is she?" Mrs. Peterson's eyes were red as she looked at her son. Mr. Peterson was silent for a moment. He thought of Sarah and Michael and sneered, "She's perfectly fine. She's with Michael right now. Who knows what kind of disgusting things they're doing." He hadn't finished speaking when Mrs. Peterson slapped him directly. The sound of the slap was loud and sharp in the empty office. Mrs. Peterson had put all her strength into that slap. Mr. Peterson froze, his ears ringing. His assistant was standing nearby, terrified. Mrs. Peterson looked at Mr. Peterson, furious that he was so blind. "Sarah must have been blind to fall for you. She's your wife, and you never cared about her, but you even. Mrs. Peterson was trembling slightly with anger. She turned to the assistant. "Where is she now?" The assistant received her look and instinctively glanced at Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson turned away his slapped right cheek and said impatiently, "Go find out." "Yes." The assistant quickly opened his computer and checked the location. After a while, he said, "Ms. Peterson's phone is currently moving towards South Shore Drive." Chapter 7, She's Back. South Shore Drive, the most famous entertainment street in the southern part of the city. Mr. Peterson looked at Mrs. Peterson sarcastically. "See? What could be wrong with her? She's probably having too much fun to answer your call. Sarah, after putting on such a show, actually had the nerve to go out and have fun with that man." Mr. Peterson gritted his teeth. He felt ridiculous for even worrying that she was genuinely hurt. Mrs. Peterson didn't believe him. She pushed past Mr. Peterson, intending to leave. As she left, she said, "You'd better forget about marrying Emily. I'll settle things with you after I find Sarah." With that, she left directly. Mr. Peterson slumped onto the sofa in frustration. After a while, he still couldn't resist pulling out his phone and calling Sarah. The phone rang twice. Mr. Peterson sat up straight, feeling a strange sense of nervousness. But the next second, the call was abruptly hung up. Mr. Peterson's anger flared. He violently slammed his phone down. The small phone hit the hard desk and instantly shattered into pieces. "Mr. Peterson, get out!" The assistant cautiously walked around the sofa and quietly closed the door behind him. He saw that Ms. Peterson's location on the laptop was continuously moving south, which seemed unusual. But given Mr. Peterson's state, he wouldn't listen to anything, so he decided to leave first. The silent night was slightly cool due to the light rain that had fallen during the day. David Peterson pushed open the villa door, feeling a bit tired. Rain-soaked flower petals were scattered all over the yard. He was about to open his mouth to complain, then suddenly remembered the butler had left that afternoon, and there was no one at home. That woman really didn't come back. He closed his eyes and rubbed his throbbing temples, opening them again to find his eyes bloodshot. A cool breeze blew past. Driven by an impulse, he walked under the porch and turned on the yard lights. She had chosen these lights in their second year of marriage. She said the yard was too dark, and this lamp looked like a cheerful garden lamp shaped like a pig. Putting it in the yard would attract wealth and ward off evil, she said. What had he said then? He said it was ugly. He still remembered that after he said that, she had glared at him, calling him tasteless. She refused help and personally stood on a ladder, wobbling, to install it. He had stood below, watching her helplessly, and had to carefully hold the ladder for her. She deliberately scared him, pretending to foul off the ladder. When he caught her in his arms, she burst out laughing and started attacking him with kisses. On the surface, he had grumbled and scolded, but only he knew how happy he was inside. At that time, she was innocent, seemingly full of endless energy. Every day he came home from work, his tired heart would find relaxation. But when did she start to change? Was it when Emily started asking for her help, or when Emily had a heart attack and she just watched with cold eyes? He had accused her of being thoughtless, or perhaps it was when conflicts began to arise between him and Michael, and she trusted Michael, not him. Staying out all night again and again, being unreachable, made him lose all patience with her. Until this time, when she had again threatened Emily to leave Harmony Creek, forcing Emily to almost lose her life, he could no longer tolerate her. The ornate lights now cast a cold glow in the darkness. His somber silhouette slowly stretched down the cold corridor. The night was slightly cool, the lights dim, the intimacy gone. A sudden pain pierced David Peterson's heart. Raindrops fell on his face. David Peterson came back to himself, then walked into the house with a cold face, stepping mercilessly over the mess on the ground, leaving behind the dim lights in the yard and the red roses swaying gently in the flower bed. A week later, David Peterson woke up with a splitting headache. He had been having increasing trouble sleeping recently, his tense nerves pushing his mind to its limit. His pale face showed prominent dark circles under his eyes. He got out of bed irritably and swallowed the painkillers he had ready. He looked at himself in the mirror and suddenly found a stranger. Was that haggard person, who looked like he had aged 10 years, him? For some reason, he didn't want to see himself like this. He violently smashed the mirror. Shards dug into his palm, but he seemed not to feel the pain as he went downstairs expressionlessly. That woman had been gone for 7 days, without a word to him. This was the longest they had ever been apart. Mrs. Peterson yelled at him every day. He set a deadline for himself. In another 7 days, if that woman didn't appear, they would get a divorce, completely. David Peterson felt like he was truly sick. When the thought of divorce crossed his mind, a part of his heart felt like it was pierced by an arrow, the sharp pain making him unable to breathe. This feeling grew more and more intense. Cold sweat instantly beaded on his smooth forehead. David Peterson covered his chest miserably, groaning in pain from his throat. He crouched down in agony. In that moment, he felt like he was the only person left in the world. It wasn't until he felt a warm touch on his shoulder that he seemed to emerge from the darkness. He gasped for air, and his tightly closed eyes slowly opened. Sarah? She's back! Chapter 8, Is She Dead? His eyes slowly focused, and he saw the woman standing in front of him. He frowned slightly, then his tense nerves relaxed a bit, and he spoke softly. Why are you here? Emily looked worried. She helped straighten his collar. David, you haven't come to see me for a week. I was so worried about you, so I came to find you. Are you okay? I'm fine. David Peterson stood up, instructing distractedly, You're just recovering. Don't come out in the cold like this. Emily nodded obediently. She saw how haggard the man looked and noticed the blood and glass shards in his palm. Emily frowned and stepped forward, carefully linking her arm through his, and pulled him to sit at the dining table. She grabbed the first aid kit from under the TV cabinet and began to treat his hand. David Peterson let her tend to him. He looked at the 3 dishes and 1 soup on the table and froze. It was exactly like what Sarah used to make for him. Emily didn't say Yuck. After treating his hand, she saw him still lost in thought and felt a surge of malice inside. She pretended to ask with concern, David, has Sarah really not come back? Meeting David Peterson's suddenly cold gaze, Emily's heart couldn't hide a cold laugh. Then she cautiously added, I heard she and Michael. David Peterson slammed his chopsticks onto the table. Emily instantly fell silent. David Peterson said coldly, Emily, you should go back. But before he could finish speaking, his phone suddenly rang. He answered the phone, and his assistant's panicked and urgent voice suddenly came through. Mr. Peterson, Miss Emily, she's suspected of. The villa gate was suddenly opened. David Peterson frowned. Before he finished listening to the assistant, he saw several police officers walk in. He hung up the phone, his unease growing stronger. Emily, you are suspected of involvement in a kidnapping case. Please come with us. David Peterson froze, as if he hadn't understood what they said. He watched Emily being taken into custody by the police officers, stood up, feeling agitated and desperate. His vision suddenly went black, and he collapsed. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Peterson. Police officers kept calling out to him beside him. David Peterson's detached thoughts returned. He looked at Emily, who seemed strangely calm. What did you do? David Peterson asked, his voice dry and hoarse. David, you need to take care of yourself. I was the one who had Sarah kidnapped. This way you'll be free, and we won't bother you anymore. Emily smiled as she met David Peterson's gaze, madness slowly emerging in her eyes. She had finally done it. She had truly set David Peterson free. She had grown up following her sister, watching her always get the best things. She was the one who had liked David Peterson first, but in the end, it was Sarah who married him. Why? David Peterson clearly didn't like Sarah. Yet she still clung to him. Only if she died would David Peterson truly be free. Emily's hatred was no longer concealed. David Peterson felt like he had been struck by lightning, not daring to dwell on her words. In his panic, he looked at the police officers. A police officer patiently repeated, "It's like this, Mr. Jiang. A week ago, we received a distress call. When we arrived, we found the hostage had already left, and the kidnapper was lying in a pool of blood, having lost an ear. We took the man for treatment, and when he woke up, he confessed that the person he kidnapped was Ms. Peterson, and the person who ordered him to do all this was Emily." David Peterson felt as if his heart had stopped beating. His eyes were bloodshot red, like a vengeful spirit, as he looked at Emily, but Emily just burst into manic laughter. The police officers felt a bit of sympathy but continued. The kidnapper confessed himself to the fact that he had violated Ms. Peterson. What? David Peterson stood frozen. Emily muttered to herself, David didn't like her anyway, right? This is for the best. She was stringing David along while flirting with Michael. I got rid of her for you, so you don't have to be bothered by her anymore. A bitch like her deserves such a miserable death, ha 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 ha. That bastard child is dead too. I got rid of 2 problems for you, David, ha 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 ha. Where is she? David Peterson lunged forward, asking frantically. Emily stroked his cheek obsessively, saying slowly, I guess she must be dead. That day, she had 2 holes in her stomach that couldn't be stopped. How could she possibly be alive? Ha 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 ha. Chapter 9, I don't believe it impossible. She can't be dead. David Peterson looked at the crazy woman in front of him, his voice hoarse with disbelief. You're lying to me. Emily sank into a memory, muttering as if to herself, I didn't want her to die at first. 2 years ago, Hat time too. I kidnapped her, but she still shamelessly called out to you for help. So I had to cut her tendons. But she had too much luck, that Michael found her again and took her away. But now, she's bothering you more and more. She shouldn't have fallen in love with you. She has to die. David Peterson slapped her hard. He couldn't control his trembling hands and was held back by the police officers. As Emily was led away, she looked back, her face swollen and red, and smiled tragically. David, you're free. She won't ever come back for you. David Peterson roared like a wild beast. He held his head in his hands, his mind feeling like it was exploding. As the bloody past was revealed, he felt an intense pain deep within him. He remembered 2 years ago, when he got the call from the kidnapper and searched for Sarah for 2 days and nights, only to find her with Michael. He had been blinded by jealousy and hadn't even noticed the abnormality in Sarah's wrists. He hadn't noticed Sarah's pale face or her deliberately light tone. During that time, the company was facing a crisis, and he was overwhelmed with work. Sarah must have been afraid of distracting him, so she endured the pain alone. She always put him first, and all he gave her was blame and ridicule. David Peterson looked back on the past. Every time, he had been certain of Emily's innocence. He had never been willing to believe Sarah. He had hurt her again and again. All of this was because of him. It turned out he was the one who deserved to die. David Peterson's bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at Emily's retreating back. He couldn't hold it in any longer, and a mouthful of blood suddenly erupted from his throat. Pfft! His vision went black, and he couldn't stay conscious any longer, collapsing into a coma. In the last shred of consciousness before he passed out, he saw a flash of the scene where they held each other under the night sky. He instinctively reached out to embrace someone, but his arms were empty. The person was no longer there. Sarah, I was wrong. Don't leave me. When David Peterson woke up, he saw Mrs. Peterson's gaunt figure. Hearing him stir, Mrs. Peterson said hoarsely, Sarah is gone. Are you satisfied? She and the baby are gone. Are you happy? David Peterson was like a man possessed, as if he didn't hear what she was saying. He got out of bed expressionlessly and called Sarah's number again. Unexpectedly, this time the call connected. David Peterson spoke excitedly, Sarah, where are you? Can I come take you home? Can I come get you? He spoke as he started to walk out, barefoot. Mrs. Peterson watched him from the side, her face filled with sorrow. It was too late. Everything was too late. She's dead. Michael's voice came from the other end of the line. David Peterson instantly stiffened. Bullshit. If you say that again, I'll kill you. She can't be dead. David Peterson roared like a lion on the brink of madness, refusing to believe Sarah was gone. Michael ignored him. Sarah is dead, David Peterson. Are you satisfied? David Peterson was both shocked and furious. Why did everyone keep asking him if he was satisfied? If he wasn't satisfied, would Sarah come back? Michael sneered and described the scene from that day in a calm voice. David Peterson, do you know how Sarah died? Do you know what she went through? Chapter 10, Don't Leave Me. David Peterson's heart was nearly suffocating. Her blood was all over the walls, her torn clothes were scattered everywhere, handfuls of her long black hair. She was a woman who cared so much about her appearance, but she died so miserably. How much pain she must have been in. David Peterson, you won. In her next life, she won't meet you again. Michael hung up the phone after saying this. He gently placed the phone down, holding Sarah's ashes in his hands. David Peterson felt like he was going mad. He couldn't get through to Sarah's number anymore. He broke free from Mrs. Peterson's restraining hand and rushed out of the villa. He had to find Sarah. His black Cadillac SUV drove wildly into traffic. David Peterson was like a fly buzzing aimlessly, not knowing where to look for Sarah. He drove recklessly through the traffic. Suddenly, he remembered the place where Sarah and he had promised to grow old together. He sped towards that direction. When he reached the Harmony Creek River in the southern part of the city, he got out of the car in a panic and immediately saw Michael sitting there. Michael held a handful of ashes and slowly opened his hand. The ashes blew into the ocean with the wind, eventually merging with the air. David Peterson's eyes widened suddenly. He stumbled forward. Michael saw him coming but didn't stop what he was doing. Stop! No! David Peterson roared, trying to prevent Michael from scattering the ashes. But the wind was too strong. Michael muttered to himself, Sarah said she loved it here the most. David Peterson, let her go. No, don't. David Peterson desperately snatched Sarah's ash box, but it was already empty. He wildly grabbed at the air, trying to hold on to any trace of her, but the wind passed through his fingers, taking everything from him. He hadn't even seen Sarah one last time, and now he couldn't even keep her ashes. David Peterson was frantic. He had lost Sarah, completely lost her. He refused to accept this fact. Michael looked at the deranged man with cold eyes. She's dead. Who are you putting on this act for? I warned her countless times that you have no heart, but she didn't listen to me. Now, for loving you, she even lost her life. David Peterson, why wasn't it you who died? Michael's tone was vicious, wishing he could kill the man on the spot to avenge Sarah. David Peterson was frantically trying to hold on to Sarah's ashes. But hearing Michael's words, his actions gradually slowed down. He watched Michael sneeringly throw the ash box into the ocean. No! He chased the ash box as it fell into the ocean. In that instant, he didn't think of anything. Someone's in the water. Hurry, save him, someone on the shore saw him and exclaimed, calling the police officers. In a daze, David Peterson thought he heard Sarah calling out to him. He joyfully opened his hands in the water, wanting to speak, but seawater rushed into his nasal cavity. He saw Sarah's wretched state from that day again. He wanted to apologize, but more and more seawater filled his mouth, and his consciousness gradually blurred. Sarah, don't leave me. From beginning to end, it was always you I loved. I did not believe you. I was just angry at you, angry you were too stubborn. I was wrong. I won't neglect you again. Please come back. If you don't come back, then I'll come find you, okay? Don't push me away this time. On the shore, Michael watched David Peterson jump into the Harmony Creek River, his face expressionless. He turned and left only when the police officers arrived for search and rescue.